The topic for today's discussion is return on employee investment. The rapid pace of the corporate world and the uncertain business environment has significantly increased stress levels among corporate professionals. Given the close association of an organization's success with its people's performance, it is becoming increasingly important for HR to not only have a happy workforce, but an engaged and healthy one as well. The HR fraternities across are making substantial investments in employee wellness, culture, workplace attractiveness, and long-term engagement. The question that arises, however, is how each of these investments, whether in the short term or long term, impact or enhance business employee productivity, and how do we measure this impact? We have the privilege of having amongst us some very prominent individuals from the HR fraternity who are here to share their views and insights on this topic. So without much delay, let us begin with the conclave. We begin with an opening address by Mr. Sharad Mundra, Senior Vice President, Vastu Shodh Infrastructure. Capital restructuring, investments, and acquiring strategic land parcels has been prime responsibility since 2012 after his 10-year stint in International Real Estate Consulting Organization. He also builds strategic relationships with numerous private equity fund houses, NBFC, and debt lending institutions. Mr. Mundra, please.
Hi friends, we have been associated with various IT companies, manufacturing companies, owing to our long-standing relationship of constructing affordable housing homes for the need and the lower segment of the society. We typically build homes that are catering to the LIG, MIG, homes need buyers that cost between 5 lakh a unit to about 30 lakh a unit, between 1 BHK, 2 BHK and 3 BHK in various locations of Pune. We are currently under constructing about 6,500 homes, have delivered about 2,500 homes, and are soon launching a new township of about 2,500 homes, which is about 25 minutes driving distance from Magarpatta Junction towards the Pune-Shulapur road. These houses are going to be costing between 6 lakh a unit to about 15-16 lakh a unit, between 1 room kitchen, 1 BHK and 2 BHK. We definitely would want to interact with a lot of few people because we strongly have seen a large attraction of buying happening by virtue of their salary patterns, which are typically between 20,000 a month to about 50,000 a month, most of the employees that work in the organizations that you represent here. We would want to get associated to see this as an opportunity for this segment of the society to come and buy and live in their own homes rather than paying high rentals, or that they cannot afford a home that are costing upward of 50 lakh, 70 lakh and things like that. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mundra. Ladies and gentlemen, we move on to our panel discussion with the panelists who will discuss the topic return on employee investment. Our first speaker for the conclave is Sameer Bendre, Chief People Officer, Persistent Systems. Could you please have a big round of applause for him? Sameer Bendre is responsible for Persistent's global HR practices, people engagement, talent acquisition, and development initiatives. He brings with him over 23 years of experience in a variety of roles like technology, finance, and operations. Sameer is actively involved in various organizations like Rotary, Vidarbha Association of Software Exporters, CII, and NASCOM at Nagpur. He holds a bachelor's degree in electronics engineering from Nagpur University and attended executive management programs at IIM Ahmedabad. He is also a certified ISO lead auditor. Welcome, Mr. Bendre. Moving on to our next speaker, Shantanu Dhar, VP and Head HR, Kirloskar Oil Engines Limited. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a big round of applause for Mr. Dhar. In his 20 plus years of experience, he has worked in companies like ITC Limited, Walmart Stores Incorporated USA, William and Mercer, HCL Technologies, and Dalmia Bharat Enterprises. He is also a published author of, and his first book, a work of fiction that was a bestseller, namely The Company Red. He is about to release his second novel, Code Red, in May. Our next guest for the evening is Dr. Shubhro Sen, former director, Tata Management Training Center. Dr. Shubhro Sen, as an entrepreneur, consultant, and educator, brings a rich and diverse experience. He is the president of Conscious Capitalism Institute, India. As a consultant on a decision support systems, mergers and acquisitions, and global sourcing strategies, Dr. Sen has worked with over 50 global corporations, including Apple Computer, Citibank, State Street Bank, Experian, Safeway, Nomura Securities, and Boston Financial, as well as various governments and development agencies from several countries. He received his PhD in Marketing and Strategic Management from the Haas School of Business, University of California, Berkeley. Welcome, Dr. Sen. Our next panelist for the discussion is Yogesh Patgaonkar, Head HR, L&T Technology Services. Please give it up for Mr. Patgaonkar. In a career spanning over 2 decades, Yogesh has handled many roles in the industry, including HR head, coach, profit center head, and an entrepreneur. Currently, Yogesh heads human resource function for L&T Technology Services, a part of L&T Group, and he is responsible for talent management, talent development, and engagement for approximately 10,000 employees spread across the world. Prior to joining L&T Technology Services, Yogesh held various portfolios in Sensor and RPG Group for over a decade. Our moderator for today's panel discussion is Mr. Rajan Kalia, co-founder Salto DFI. Can we have Mr. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Kalia, for joining. Rajan works in the area of business enablement and leapfrogging organizations to the next level of growth. Rajan brings in experience of 22 years in human resources in varied settings. In his past, he has worked for Max Life Insurance, Coca-Cola India, Eicher, and Ballarpur Industries. Under his leadership, Max Life Insurance has won Great Places to Work and Gallup Best Workplace Award. He is a startup specialist and has set up HR systems from grounds up for 2 organizations, Coca-Cola South Zone and Max New Life Insurance. Can we have a big round of applause for the panel, please? I would like to request you all to share your views on Twitter. We have mentioned our handle and hashtags on the screen. Also, please keep your mobile phones on silent mode. Mr. Kalia, over to you, please.
Thank you, Ivan. Good evening. I can't see the audience. Can I have a little bit of light there, if it is possible, to get a little bit of light, not too much, and the light on us is too bright. I'd like to share a little bit of brightness out there also. The way we're going to do this is we're going to have roughly 45 minutes to an hour between us, and we'll have some 5 or 6 questions being asked. And then we're going to open it up to all of you to ask as many questions to all of us as possible during the time we have. And we're going to straight away jump into asking some interesting, provocative questions on the topic. So I will turn to my left, and I'm going to ask you to say, okay, what in your perspective has been, Yogesh, the term ROI, and specifically when you apply it to industry like yours, which is engineering services, L&T. Have you ever, peeled that onion and looked at deeper on what does ROI mean to you, or do you have some scorecards? What's the term meaning to you in your organization?
Before I talk about specifically about my organization, I think this question keeps hitting all my HR friends, especially from CFOs. Why should we invest on HR? And I'm going to leave with a couple of thoughts which are data points.
Sure.
Which could be an answer and what is an ROI on people. Okay. Thankfully, there was a finance professor from New York University who has done a survey. He has written a book on capitalization, market capitalization. His name is Lev Brook. On x-axis, he charted about the regression of revenue and profit to the company's capitalization. And on the y-axis, on the x-axis, he charted the years. From 0.9 in 80s that number has come to 0.5. So the relation between the profit and revenue and the market capitalization has really come down to half. Then what does it account for? And a finance professor, underline, says that it is intangibles which determine the capitalization. Because when we are talking about return on investment and capitalization, all those things, it's a very significant data point that today the companies are saying that a company's capitalization is determined by intangibles, which is basically human capital. First point. Second point is Ernst & Young did a survey with 600 analysts, 300 on buy side and 300 on sell side. And they came out with 7 parameters what they use to determine a capitalization. 6 of them are HR parameters like, succession planning, leadership quality and things like that. So I think why should somebody invest in HR? These are two very, very solid kind of data points there. Now coming to the little, from a 30,000 feet to a reality, I think just like all companies, we measure the return on investment in terms of, in L&D technology services, in terms of the number of IPs and number of patents that we file. That is one of the parameters that we, that is the use. And second is that we have some internal development parameters which give us whether the investment on employees is working out. And those parameters are in terms of how many positions are filled up internally when it came into a technical leadership as well as in the people management, how many IPs are filed, how many patents are, and those like.
All right, interesting. So let's just stay at 30,000 feet for some more time. So what's your view on ROI? What do you think it means in this context?
Let me in fact supplement what Yogesh said, but firstly let me greet everybody. Good evening. It's a pleasure to be back here at the Shine event as well. Let me also respond conceptually by first looking at that term. As you know, whenever we use these frequently monitored terms, there are a lot of unexamined assumptions behind these terms. And just for conceptual sake, I believe all 3 terms used, return, employee, and investment, have all evolved radically over the last 2 decades, especially in an accelerating way. So what does return really mean in the current context? I believe looking at it purely financially, as Yogesh was saying, is a necessary but not a sufficient way to understand the nature of the return. And as we progress this evening, perhaps we can talk about how do we broaden the idea of return into really looking at impact and looking at outcomes, and specific outcomes, not all of which are calibrated and measurable financially. And that was the point, valuable point that Yogesh raised. The second nature is the investment. What is the type of investment are you making? What is the time span over such an investment? So again, construing it narrowly does, I think, really violence to the core idea and the integrity of the notion of the investment. And today we invest in many different ways, and the opportunities for investment are large. Same thing with employee. Today, as we know, and he mentioned in the, I'm involved with a group called Conscious Capitalism. One of the elements why conscious capitalism has been very successful as a business philosophy over the last 2 decades is that it emphasizes stakeholder management, a true stakeholder orientation as opposed to a purely shareholder-driven orientation. Now, within the stakeholder map, we find today contractors are enormously valuable as well. Should we not invest in making them productive? What is the overall object of the investment? So suppliers add 85% of the value of many products. Does it make sense to increase your ambit of your sharing and your communication and your learning? So all I wanted to say at the preface, and we can get perhaps more into more detail as we go, is that all 3 terms need to be particularized, need to be contextualized, need to be understood with a very specific view into your own organizational impact. And then you can devise, as it were, appropriate metrics.
So we got a conceptual, kind of a understanding of this. Let's ask a little bit of a ground level question to you to say that from that concept to applying it here, whether in this organization or earlier organization, or even if you were to share some of your views on saying, how would you like to really apply it as a practicing professional, and what value does it bring to you if you were to say that we really want to measure the ROI? What's the value it creates for the organization?
Excellent. Yeah, I'd love to answer that. Can I do a little interactive with the audience, if I can?
Sure, go ahead.
So, how many HR professionals do we have here? Oh, excellent. And I assume the rest of, all of you are functional professionals, am I correct? Okay. So, let's ask just a couple of questions over here. I like to, you'll have to forgive me, I like to oversimplify things. So, what is ROI really? I mean, anybody, what does ROI stand for? Just shout it out. You know, just. Excellent. Yeah, return on investment. What does that mean? No, what does that mean? What does return on investment mean? एक simple सवाल कर रहा हूँ मैं यार, एकदम very simple question. What does it mean? Exactly. If मैंने कुछ पैसे लगाए तो ज़्यादा मिलना चाहिए, right? So, what is the investment which you do into employees in an organization? What is it called? Sorry? You know, let's go one level lower, यार. Investment. हमने कहा पैसे लगाते हैं ना. So what is it that how do we invest in employees? One level lower, yeah. What simple answer? Salary. Yes, excellent. Who said that? Yeah, thanks. Yeah, great, wonderful. Give him a big hand. Yeah, give him a hand. You know, the reality in working lies in these simple details. You know, so you know, when you talk about giving money to workmen. The Industrial Disputes Act and the Payment and Wages Act calls it wages. Why is it called wages? Anybody? Why is it called wages? Anyone? Very simple answer, yeah. Correct. Output is very easily measurable. So you pay wages, right? Now when it comes to management, what do we pay? What do we call it? Salary. What's the other name for salaries? Compensation. Who said compensation? Excellent, sir. Give him a big hand. Yeah, in simple terms. Why do we call it compensation? Sorry, a lady spoke over there. Yes, ma'am. Is it really, are we compensating them? Hang on. Let's go to that lady. Are we really compensating them? We are all HR people. Do we really compensate people for what they are doing? I don't know. I don't remember compensating anybody for what they're doing. Yeah. Actually, it is actually very tangible. Huh? Tell you the truth, it's very simple and it's very, very tangible. Why is it called compensation? Ah, excellent. He said we are paying you for the time. Give him a big hand. It's a very simple thing. You know, my friend Rajan, past 20 plus years, he has developed some skills and some competencies, right? If he was to hawk them in the market, hawking is not a nice thing, but if you were to hawk them in the market, he would be paid, he would earn X amount of rupees. Am I correct?
Sure.
In a month? Absolutely. Now I, as the HR head of Coil, and say, Rajan, I want you to work with me, boss. Rajan says, you know, I'm a consultant, you know, I just hawk my wares in the market and I make X amount of money. I told Rajan, if you work for me, I won't be able to pay you that much. Rajan says, then, but why should I work for you? But guess what? You get a paycheck every month. So there is a constant which is coming into your life. I pay you a percentage of that X which you're going to earn in the market. I am compensating Rajan for the time that he spends in my organization. That's a tangible. In compensation, what you're actually doing is you're paying your managers whose output you can't really measure, because most managers like me, we spend times in meetings and making wonderful presentations, right? I've never seen a presentation's outcome come into revenues or profits. I don't know if you have seen. I haven't seen that yet.
I get paid for that. So
you get paid for that.
I have to justify that.
Yeah, so most of us, you know, we just sit there, we speak good English and we make presentations, right? So I'm just joking. No, actually we do, yeah. So managers are compensated for the time that they spend in the organization. So we say, listen, Rajan, okay, so you're going to do X, Y, Z. This is your job description. To do all of this, I am going to compensate you, right? I'm going to pay you, say, maybe whatever. Okay, 50 lakhs, 60 lakhs, 20 lakhs, 10 lakhs, 15 lakhs. But I'm going to give you some KRAs or KPIs. You know, we have some lovely ways of describing these things, which basically means, boss, ये तुम्हारा day-to-day काम है, because of which I'm compensating you. I'm compensating you for the time that you're spending. Over and above this, This is the company strategy, objectives, revenue figures, etc. If you achieve, etc., 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 then I pay you something more than your compensation. And what do we call that? Incentives, but we have a better name for that. Now, we are all management people, so you want to talk nicely, politically correct. We call it a variable pay, right? So, ladies and gentlemen, what I simply do, and I'm not saying I'm correct, is that I look at my compensation figures, I look at my variable pay figures, I look at my wage figures. Now, there is something over and above this. What is that? For the people that actually work for me. Something over and above this. What is that? Perks? Yes. What else? Sorry? No, we already talked about that. So, yeah, perks is there. What else? Let's say the perks are part of the compensation structure, right? Most smart HR people will put the perks as a part of the compensation structure and say, Rajan, you know what? We're paying you X much, but 30% of that are your perks, which you may or may not get, whatever. Okay, Rajan may not want. I may give Rajan a nice car. He says, you know what? I have a Merc back at home. I don't want your silly Nissan, right? What is it? What else do we have over and above compensation, over and above BPP? Sorry? That's part of compensation. A good IT company will give stock options, right? Sorry?
Retirement, he said retirement.
That's part of compensation. That's your long-term and short-term compensation. No, this is again tangible here. It's a cost. I'm talking about return on investment, guys. I'm not talking about anything else. That's an intangible. I'm talking about company mein kya milta hai. It's a cost. What is it? That's part of compensation. Part of compensation. The good HR guy will put all of that. He'll make sure that you get as less cash as possible. He'll put all of these things. Yeah. Think. What is it? There's something over and above this. Part of incentives, part of all of that. There is something, it's very tangible, very simple. Hey, ye, hota hai. Sorry? Okay, I'll just give it to you. So we don't have that much time. It's a cost of your electricity, cost of that computer, cost of that laptop, cost of the office space, okay, cost of your travel, okay, cost of me coming to a place like this, etc., and all of that, saying nice things in front of people and all of that. It's called something very, very easily, it is called as landed cost. So for every person that works in an organization, you have their wages, you have their compensation, and you have a landed cost. And many times your landed cost can be at least 100% of what that particular person actually earns from a cash factor. So compensation, wages, your variable bonus, and your landed cost becomes your employee-related expenses. Very simple, very, very simple. Okay. A good HR department will take the landed cost, will take the wages cost, it includes everything, including the training and development, recognition, everything. Put all of this together and say, this is my employee-related expenses. And the rule of thumb which basically goes, any finance person will tell you, in a company which is 5,000 crores and lower, your employee-related expenses essentially should be sub 10%. Now that is a decent ROI. And if it is less than 7%, you get a promotion as an HR head. That's all I have to say.
All right, thank you. So it took us around the trees, but we got the point.
Right.
So I'm going to turn to you and ask you your views on saying, did you ever measure this landed cost, and do you measure it, and in what context do you measure it? And are you likely to get a promotion because it's less than 10% in your company?
He can't.
The industry in which me and Samir work, it is if you keep it less than 50%, you are good.
Correct.
I think you took me, but first of all, good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. So I will not go around about it. I think in the industry which I come from, where IT, like you said, I think people, human capital is the biggest cost. And if I were to ask my CEO, or there's a survey done with most of the CEOs across, what do they lose sleep over? It is talent. Will I have the right talent when I have the business? And will my talent be productive? If these are the only two things which he is going to lose sleep over, that's what he has to look at. And that is why measuring an employee cost or measuring the returns, what we are going to get on the cost, becomes the paramount thing for him to do. My CFO would spend maximum of his time looking at what am I doing on the employee cost and not doing it any other things. So they really are, that's the biggest cost we have.
Great. So let's just shift the topic and get into a little bit of a different element here, because it has always intrigued me, and I'm going to turn to you, Shubhro, to say, Tell me, why would we always, ask the HR about saying what's the return on investment on employees? Why don't we ask the finance guys what's the return on investment on finance? And you mentioned in your earlier in a conversation about the impact and the outcome, right? We never ask the finance guy what's your impact and what's your outcome. We never ask the strategy guy or the marketing guy. Why do we have this? And especially with the new industries coming in, why do we have this whole constant pressure on HR saying, no, you please tell me what's the ROI on human capital?
I think that's a very good question. I believe it comes from a legacy of narrowly construing the business in a very economic way, in an input-output manner. One of the famous statements in Hindi movies is, "Hamara bhi din aayega." I believe "Hamara din aa gaya hai." This is the age, if there was one, of HR and leadership development. As we know, today we're in such a deep battle, as it were, for not just acquiring talent, but maintaining and sustaining the talent and taking them to the next step. So the portfolio of opportunities available today are, in that sense, so much richer, and the time has really come. I mean, in some senses, to really look at three elements for HR and L&D. And this doesn't fully answer your question. It goes beyond that. Okay, people didn't asked us those questions unfairly in the past, the hell with them. Today it's really time for these 3 R's. I think first and foremost, it's time to reimagine what is indeed possible and then redefine the function and reposition it within the organization. I think looking at it in very conventional terms is passé. Today, it's really about performance enhancement, perhaps strategic performance enhancement. So I believe the days are past where these questions will be asked. I think today the differentiator comes from the way you manage your entire processes pertaining to people and building a vibrant culture. So in that sense, I believe that it's an unfair remnant of the past.
So what's your view on this? So he said, let the question pass. But what's your view on a day-to-day basis when you face the CFO? As you were saying, you face the CFO, you face, strategy guys. Do you think it's a fair question to be asked to HR guys?
Absolutely.
And what's your view? Why should it be a fair question to be asked to HR guys?
Well, I think each and every, the issue that we are facing currently, and I've been in the IT industry like my friends over here for 8 years. I was with HCL Tech. And I've actually seen how the cost of arbitrage that we have as in India, I've seen us losing that year on year. Okay. If you really say, if you look at what individuals are giving back in return for, today, let's put it this way, an average person who has spent around 15 years in the industry is at par with his US counterpart. If you look at PPP, purchasing power parity. Okay. Based upon that, if you see the efficiency of companies within the IT industry or manufacturing industry, and you compare that with the efficiency of what is available in Europe and in the US, let's not even talk about Japan, right? I'm just talking about Europe and US. We are lacking. We are lacking. We still say that, okay, I'm a finance department, I need to have this big army of people, but you know what? Are you really employing systems? Are you really employing processes to get you what you actually need? Do you really need a bunch of taxation experts? You need a good product, right? And you need a couple of people that understand this particular product. You can outsource everything else. Outsourcing also in India, we look at it in a very different way, It's surprising. I'll give an example. This large facilities company, came to me the other day and says, we can take over your facilities. In Kirloskar, we have huge facilities. When I asked them to work out this cost, because I was trying to reduce manpower in my facilities, they came up with twice the cost. I'm like, excuse me. I mean, on one hand, I'm trying to control the number of contractual workmen who come into my organization every day. You come back with twice the cost. It just doesn't make sense. Why should I go for you? So from that perspective, I think it is very important to ask every individual in the organization, whether it's a salesperson or a finance person or an HR person, what is your ROI? Yeah, I think it's very important.
Fair enough. And if you were to look at it from your frame and ask you that question, what will be your answer to that? Is it fair? Is it not fair? And if it is fair, why is it fair?
I think more than fair, I think the first answer is, I think in our industry it's a must.
Yeah.
If you really say that you're not going to look at employee cost, see, if you look at how balance sheet is published, you see something which is called an return on capital investment or return on capital cost.
ROC.
In an IT company, the employee is the biggest cost and he is the biggest capital. That's the way you're going to do it. So you really need to not only measure it, not to enhance that value which you can get at every level, and how every delta change in value can really give you a big change in your overall business benefits is what you need to look at.
So let me turn to you and turn the question completely around and say that, you know, it's the humans who invented all the concepts, including ROI. Now we're turning to humans and saying, I want to measure your return on capital or your return on investment. I thought the question is completely unfair. You know, it's to say that, you know, as a human being, what's the return you are getting me? And if you were to ask, for example, let's say you have kids, yeah, so you are investing in their education. Are you going to ever ask them what's the return on your education to me?
Okay, let me answer it this way. Those of you who were in the college, you will remember the person who will get ragged most is the person who is most scared. Okay? So if you are scared of numbers, you will get ragged on these questions. Let me be very candid. I would very strongly bat in favor of measuring return on investment, and I'll give you a reason. When I invest in the education of my child, obviously I look at the grades of a child and I don't just leave it like that. And it doesn't make me a bad parent. So when I'm investing, as Samir very rightly said, or even Shantanu said, there are very specific costs. We are doing business.
You're doing business, yeah?
There are two levels at which you have to measure that. One are very simple measures. I mean, those of you who are in the service industry, there's a very simple measure like, you know, what is the revenue per employee? You're measuring something, and this is very basic. Okay. The second thing what you are measuring is that if you develop simple parameters and link them back to the HR parameters, it gives you a lot more clarity. For example, if I take a very simple parameter saying that my per employee cost, which is very critical in our kind of industry, should not cross this, I have to relook at the way I'm staffing pattern, my pyramids, the way the skill mix. Is there any other way of doing it? And it is a lot of HR imperatives if you are able to convert those, a simple thing like a cost, which is a investment. And that is at a very basic level, I would say at a very physical level. At what Dr. Subra said is also absolutely, this is one level, which is hygiene. You know, I have a kind of an income and I'm spending some income. It's just a good hygiene to say that whether I'm spending it right. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think all of us should be comfortable with it. The second thing is that why are companies today measuring engagement scores and things like that? Are we featuring in the great place to work and things like that? Because human capital is the only capital. If you really, the people are excited, they can give you crack results, which is disproportionate. You have a machine and you have an output defined. This machine will give you this much output. But if a human being is excited, engaged in something, he can give you a very different kind of an output, and that is very difficult to measure. It can take a company in a different league. An excited bunch of people can take a company in a different league, and I do not think that there are right measures available for that.
So let's just build on that point, Shubho, and say that, you know, we want to measure something, it is intangible, you know, but at the same time we want it to be tangible, like they said that let's, you know, measure the revenue per employee, etc. How are humans being treated? Are they being treated like, is that asset, capital, and all that stuff? It's just like machine, right? The whole frame of mind works on saying, whether I put a machine or man, I got to, you know, from a pure business perspective, I need to measure it. And I know I'm driving the point a little bit towards the negative side and the evil side, but I want to bring it out to say, okay, does it really make sense?
No, I think that's it's a very good, very timely question. You heard me speak about the evolution and the change. And I think one good encapsulation is provided by Gary Hamel. I don't know if you're familiar with Gary Hamel. He's a very prominent management thinker, and one thing that he said some years ago really resonated with me. And he said the industrial time and work model that I pay you for your time, I'm only interested in your expertise and the time you spent, I don't care who you are, what really turns you on, what is your passion, what makes you most productive, that model is broken. We have to move beyond that. We have to embrace the whole person bringing to work and what they bring to that. So in keeping with that light, as I was saying, the focus really needs to be on outcomes and impact. And outcomes increasingly today We may not have had the technology and the capacity to track outcomes at a granular level in the past. Today we do. Today we have to take a different approach to development and in force training. Part of it is to make the individual as much of a stakeholder in their own development as opposed to being passive recipients of career development. So the whole process of defining outcomes for each individual in a particular context where a company is in a very specific market situation, my point is that the outcomes that are being measured, that are desired results, that don't necessarily have to be purely quantitative, that can be observed, are important as a driver for what you design. And then tracing that outcome to the impact that you want to achieve. That has to be the new lens. That what's the impact? It goes beyond, yes, my return on employee. It goes to the differential impact of specific individuals in a well-designed program. So all I'm saying is that the tools of reimagining what is possible for HR, what is possible, have truly evolved, and we as a profession have to therefore move forward and use ROI as a stepping stone to the deeper consequences we are seeking, which is true performance impact for the organization.